Welcome to PucktalkCS. I'm Matthew Mugno, the Chavs man, alongside Steve-O. Before we get to hockey, few things have gone on. I went to LA. I want to know what Steve-O's been up to. Listen, we've had a lot of interactions online on all of our platforms lately, and it's been phenomenal. We've loved it, and we decided that no, it's not the end of August, but we decided to come back on a week later because we've really enjoyed interacting with you guys. So. Really excited. We don't have too many pressing topics to talk about with the New York Rangers, as it has only been 1 week. But I think it's good to start because before you know it, draft next week, July 1st, the following Monday.
And the off season is a time that goes by so fast. And listen, we're back. We're back. We love doing this. We love all you guys. We love your interactions. So listen, Chives, let's do it. Let's talk some puck. And now that we've had some time to digest the season, Stanley Cup, Oilers, Panthers up 2-0. I want to get your thought on that.
Yeah, I think something NYR Louis put it up. A great Twitter account. He's very active. Steve Alquette retweeted a fan page's tweet because it was a stat. It was crazy. They've held some of the best NHL goal scorers and point producers to nothing. Connor McDavid has played, I would say he has elevated his game, if that's even possible, and they're still shutting him down. He had 1 assist in game 2. We're not talking he came into the series and had 5 points in 2 games. So as much as there is to criticize about, of course, we got to bring in the Ranger conversation in here. As much as there's to criticize about Mika and Panarin, I do think they're shutting down teams. They are really good, Steve. I mean, top to bottom, they have a star. They have a grind, in Barkov, skill guy. Kachuk, who can kind of do both, but he's really got that grit and he changed the culture. A lot of guys who have stepped up, Forsling, Montour, Bennett, Reinhart, and they have the number 1 goalie. And for me, I mean, if I'm rooting for anybody, I think the team that had like 9 first overall picks and don't really have the starting goaltender comparable to Aiden Hill last year and Stuart Skinner. I would rather see the team that's well constructed, that drafted, traded, and built a team really well with their coaching hire as well, over the team that I feel has kind of been buoyed by their top end talent.
Now, let me ask you this now after that. A great analysis. I got nothing to add on top of that. Does it make you feel better as a Rangers fan that you see Edmonton go out there in game 1, they get shut out, just like they shut us out in game 1. You see McDavid really hasn't made the impact he's wanted to, Draisaitl, all these other key players. And that's the strength of this Edmonton team. It's their offense. It's not their defense. It's definitely not their goaltending. We've said this many times before. It's their offense. And now you see Florida shutting them down. They're saying they're playing the same game, and they do it so well. Do you feel any better now, like as a Ranger fan?
Yeah, I mean, if you analyze it, like I think it doesn't, because we talked about it last episode. The post that blew up was talking about Mika's advantage at 5-on-5. I don't think it gives those players, the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't. I don't think you necessarily like. I don't cut slack from what we thought about their performances. But it is also very obvious that this is a team that not only can shut down top-end talent. I mean, they're doing it now in the final stage, the championship round. Evan Rodriguez has more goals than Connor McDavid. So, yeah, I think they can do it both ways. They also have an infinity gauntlet of the goaltenders they defeated. Swayman, I believe, Vasilevsky, round 1. Shesterkin, conference final. They've played tougher competition in net. So I do think it doesn't necessarily, like, Panarin and Zibanejad still have to play their best in the conference final, because whether it's Tampa, whether it's Florida, and who knows who it could be, hopefully next year or down the road, they can't just, have performances like that and kowtow and say, well, they're the better team. In this case, Florida is, but that's just how I see it. Like next year, if they played Boston in the conference final and they don't put up points again, barring their New York Rangers, I don't think they're really going to move, but we could get into that too. Yeah, I don't know. Steve, does it change how you feel at all?
A little bit, in terms I think of it as a twofold approach. In terms
Hmm.
of our individual team, I'm a little split. I don't like to root for the team that beats my team.
Hmm.
But I guess unless if it's not the Devils or the Islanders, I guess it really doesn't matter in the end. And my opinion on this has kind of changed. After watching Florida in the Cup these first two games, they're the best team. They're the best
Hmm.
team in the NHL, and there's no doubt about it. Your runner-ups would have been the Dallas Stars and us, the Rangers, but Florida's the best team, and let's be honest, the way they play is just so tight. I mean, you look at the shots, in game two, after the second intermission, it was like 18 Florida had, or I think 20 some shots, and the Oilers they had less than 10. And again,
Hmm.
that's the way Florida plays, and I really want to bring that point in you just made about goaltending. They beat the combo of the best goaltenders in the league in Swayman, Vasilevsky, Igor. Can't say the same about Edmonton and Stuart Skinner, but they beat that, and there's so many levels. And I'm just gonna admit, as a Ranger fan, you know, I'm not crazy about Edmonton, and I would have said before the series, after we got eliminated, yeah, I don't want Florida winning. But now I'm kind of changed. I'm acknowledging that, yeah, they are way better, and yeah, they do deserve to win the cup the way they are playing. And as a Ranger fan, maybe after being eliminated, it gives me a little sense of relief that they're shutting everybody down, not just us. But in the same sense, I don't want to use that as an excuse as to
Hmm.
why our dogs weren't able to show up. So I'll ask you, Chives. We've had a couple weeks now to digest this elimination. Is there anything you changed your opinion of, or you think differently since we last spoke on our last episode?
Well, I think it's straight what we were saying. I do think Florida is the most complete, team, and I like the way their team's built. I want to see Stanley Cup champion teams mimic that blueprint. You always see after a Stanley Cup championship with Tampa, now Florida is at least in the Stanley Cup final, and you're seeing the blueprint for what teams should follow. I would much rather teams look at Florida and the way they play than Edmonton the way they play. That doesn't necessarily have to do with the Rangers, but I do think Larry Brooks has been on it. He said if Rempe really puts in the work this offseason, he becomes a valuable piece to the team. You need to build with players like Sam Bennett. You need to build with players like Reinhart, who can also mix it up. It's not just going to come from those skill guys. So I think over the last 2 weeks, they were the better team. And we knew that even in the series. But I also think the way they're constructed is something to look at. And I think fans will desire in New York after that series. And with that, Steve, actually, this is off the top. I know we talked a little bit before we hopped on the mic here, but with kind of that culture change, do not necessarily who you think. Do you think there's going to be a radical trade or change in the next 2 weeks before either the NHL draft or July 1st free agency for the Rangers?
I do not think so, Chives. And definitely, I don't think the next 2 weeks, especially as the cup winds down. Generally, this time is quiet. You see the random trades here and there. Ryan McDonough gets tossed around.
Yeah.
But I'm going to extend that even further to the next 3 weeks, and we pass the draft, and we're getting to free agency, and we're getting towards that August. I'm going to say no. I really don't think so, and I think we saw this team make major, major change ups last season. Getting rid of Gallant, getting Laviolette, getting a whole new system in, changing our priorities. That's another big one too. Heedle, Kako, Lafreniere, those were the priorities. I really don't think so, Chaz. I think we have our core, and our core is not going anywhere. Whether it's Panarin, whether it's Mika, whether it's Kreider, Truba was the one that was on the chopping block. I don't think he's going anywhere. And I don't think we could talk about the injury, but I really don't think the injury that comes out, Truba was dealing with a major, ankle injury. Big chunk of his ankle was missing. I really don't think that changes things, Chavs, and I don't think we're going to see that. I'm going to be curious to see what our priorities are going to be next season. Do you have any, like, again, last year was the transition, Heedle, Loft, Kako. I'm kind of curious. This is kind of like a quick raw off-season thought, but what do you think do you have any glaring thing that is going to take focus next season? Because I don't right off the bat.
Gosh, next season. Well, I think, the draft and July 1st change everything. And I believe there will be a culture shakeup. Vince Mercogliano reported today. He actually said on, I think, Blue Shirt Breakaway, that podcast, that's me, Ryan Mead. He did say on that he believes that they are interested in making a move. Now, the issue with this season is the Matt Tkachuk trade was one of those rare trades that happened while the playoffs were still going on. Clearly, it was a blockbuster even the time it happened. So not even just now 2 years removed from that. But I don't know. I don't think there's a player available that can do what the Rangers are hoping to do with that. I don't think they're going to force it. But I do think they have interest in some of these moves. I do think Chris Drury is a man that's constantly looking to improve the team. Now, Steve-O, with that, the one right wing spot is a big hole, and I don't feel the trade deadline was impactful. It wasn't very impactful, at least not as much as we've seen in years past from the front office. Do you think that has left it? Like, do you think that affects where the Rangers are now? And not only that, but how do you view, in retrospect, now that we're going, 4 seasons from the Buchnevich trade and a lackluster trade deadline, does that change how you feel about the offseason approach or making moves at all?
I wouldn't say it changes my approach on how we make moves, but it definitely changes my approach for sure of what we need. And that is a
Mm-hmm.
spot you look at the last few seasons. I mean, that was really the one spot that was our one piece we truly were missing. I think we've had a solid defensive core. I mean, there's no
Mm-hmm.
doubt about that. Igor, next question, please. And our offense up and down the lineup. I think this year we did such a really good job at solidifying the fourth and third line, adding new pieces. Will Cooley, I thought was great. He had a great year. He fit in and kind of brought something that, was kind of new to the table and also at the same time being a sustainable long-term piece. But that spot on the first line is something we truly were missing. And again, the Booch trade, yeah, it stinks, and we've heard his name for like the last 2 seasons of a piece the Rangers could go back and acquire. I never really thought we would do that because again,
Me too.
it's just I'm not a big fan of going back to something. It's why'd you do it? And again, looking back, at that trade again. 2021, it was a different season. It was before 2022. Our priorities were just coming out of the rebuild. Would I go back and stop that trade? 100%. I mean, look at what we got. Sammy Blais, no longer a part of the team. And we got a second-round pick, I think, which you mentioned before the Epi was used to go out and get Cop. Cop, great piece, but didn't work out. Didn't get us over that hunch. And as we progress here, the hunch is set, Chives. We got to get over the hill. The hunch on the hill is the Eastern Conference Finals, and we got to find a way. And again, moving forward, that one position is going to be the one I'm circling the most. And I think this year in particular, Mika, Kreider, this is probably their worst year, both of them, in the last 2 years. And again, that spot's got to get better. It's got to get improved. I know we were all hype on the Blake Wheeler type of player. It didn't work. Jack
Mm-hmm.
Roslovic type player didn't work. So I'd like to hear your thought on it now. But moving forward, we got to circle that spot.
Yeah, I agree, right? Like in retrospect, of course, anyone would want to change that Booch trade, but I also think it directly opened up a spot in the lineup for Lafreniere to take that second line spot. I know we're talking about the first line. I think they were really hoping Kakko would take that. And with that as well, I felt that when Kakko mentioned in the breakup day, he can't say he never got the chance to be with Kreider and Zibanejad. It sounds like the organization was expecting that. That's kind of what I took away from it, that, They tried him there twice this season. He's been there. The most confident he was before they went back to the kid line in 2023 with Kreider and Zibanejad, according to, again, Vince's reporting. So, I think they were hoping he could take that spot, and I think he's going to become a wild card in the offseason, because I don't think you're going to get like a first-round pick for him. So he's either going to be packaged in a big deal to swing, for example, this is not sourced, I don't believe it would happen, Brady Tkachuk. Or, you keep him and you either keep him in that third line role, but I think it gets very cyclical if you try him on the first line again. I agree though, right? Like, I think it's to the point we clearly seen that it's not about extracting the best out of Zibanejad and Kreider. Like, they have to be better. And with that, I have a thought. I want to bounce this off you. I wrote about it at Blue Line Station. Do you think Philip Hedl could play the one right wing spot next season?
Definitely. I definitely think, how about this? It's worth trying out. At this point last year, we tried everything. I mean, we went from Blake Wheeler, which completely failed. Then we go out and we get Roslovic at the trade deadline. He had good speed, and I thought he had a good stretch towards the end of the playoffs. But he was pretty ineffective, to be honest. And we saw himself go from a top line wing to playing on the third and fourth line. And he really, looking back at it, don't want to deviate, but now that I mentioned it, I don't think Roslovic was a good fit in the system. We'll get to that in a second. But I do think we could see Hedl go up to that one. We saw it in the playoffs a little bit. I thought he looked good. I don't know if it was just everybody else was tired from playing the whole postseason, and he didn't play any postseason games up to that point. But I thought, especially in round 2, we saw it, but I thought in the Eastern Conference Final, Hedl did look good, and they didn't make the noise. But again, I don't think it was such a small sample because, again, like we said, Florida is so damn good. I would want to see that. I like that point. I would want to see that, and I think we're way too far out to give any sort of prediction or start talking lines. I mean, the guys are probably just getting on their flights to their vacations now at the end of the season. I think you're going to see a whole bunch of guys if we don't go out and get a solidified player for the first line. I think you might see a lot of guys go up there, and again, it's too early to say that, but I want to bounce that back over to you since you brought it up. You must think that he might have a shot at that first line.
Yeah, I thought he looked really good in that spot. There's been conversation before about if he's going to center or play the wing. And I mean, he centered Zibanejad and he centered Panarin and Lafreniere. But now Trocheck seems like you just can't touch that line after how great they were this season. And it's sad because I thought that line was clicking when Hedl played 10 games of the regular season. Like, I would have kept him there. If he wasn't out as long as he was, I would have thought, if it was a few games, they would have brought him back to that spot. So you can't move Trocheck. That's not even a question. So I do think we could see him on that. I just think it's a thought that if they can't make a huge trade, just based on their the clauses on contracts, etc., and I don't think the bargain bin route has worked, why not try someone in-house that, do you want Hedl centering the third line or do you want him on the right wing? I just think it's an option for the organization to have.
Now that you brought up Phil Hedl, I think this is the perfect time. End of season, he comes back. We're sitting there. I remember the episode was precisely where we're like, shit, Hedl's done for the year. He ends up coming back for a few games in the playoffs. I want to ask you, how confident are you in Phil Hedl transitioning to next year? Are you confident that he could remain a consistent piece in this offense? We know he's had injury problems. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was looking back. I love doing the info grabs and the stat grabs. Like, he's had a crazy few years. He scored 8 goals in the 22 regular season and then scored 7 in that crazy conference final run in 22. That's where he broke out, right? We were like, oh my gosh, he's going to be a monster next year. In 2023, he was a monster. He shattered his point totals. and then they lose in that series. He plays 10 games of the regular season and then has a long-term injury. We didn't even know the future of his career. You can't predict. I think the only thing that still worries me is like, it feels like a fragile situation. Even we don't know exactly the exact reason for the day-to-day scratches that we saw at times. He played one game in Carolina, then didn't play the next game. If it's related to that, I would be concerned. But, again, we don't have that information. We'll never know that information. I would just say everybody hopes that he can remain healthy for 82 next year, 82 games and beyond.
Yeah, I want to go back to a point I made a few minutes ago on Jack Roslovic. Ultimately, this is a time on reflection, and I've come to this conclusion that I don't think Roslovic was effective. I don't think he fit our system well. I want to get your thoughts on that, but also Wenberg as well. Wenberg was kind of keyed as our biggest trade deadline acquisition. And he was rather ineffective as well, scoring that one goal. It was a big goal, but he only had one assist. And I really don't think he has a piece, and he doesn't really add anything moving forward. I think we already set the tone by extending Hot Broad, and by extending a player like him in season. To me, that just signifies that we don't need a Roslovic moving forward, and we don't need a Wenberg moving forward. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wanted to know kind of your thoughts on now in retrospect, because I've been thinking about it a lot myself, the trade deadline. This year it felt like in some ways there were a lot of these parallels. Like last year they went big. This year they went subtle. But in some ways the Roslovic move felt more like Chris Drury ran out of options and was like, well, I need a player for that position. Listen, that may also not be factual. Like there's never been a statement that alluded to that. Yeah, I think the shame about Wenberg is the Rangers' identity, their culture is in question, and their longevity for that matter. Like, how long is now this cup window propped open for? The right moves will keep that open for a longer period of time. But the Wenberg move, you traded a second round pick. And some may say, well, yeah, but we're going for this Stanley Cup. They broke the record for wins. But also now you surrendered a second round pick. Now, granted, they kept their first round pick. But when you trade 2 picks for a depth player, you're hoping that they're effective enough that maybe you consider keeping them around. That wasn't the case. I don't think either of them stick around. I don't think they were bad. I don't think they blew me out of the water by any means. And I think that's kind of consensus in Ranger land. So, yeah, I think, I don't think either of them return. And I know we talked about it. We did the autopsy with our last episode. But, I mean, we're touching upon some of the same stuff because not a lot's happened in the Rangers world.
Yeah, I agree with you. You throw Blake Wheeler in there too. He wasn't a trade deadline acquisition, but you have Blake Wheeler as a free agent. You have Roslovic and Wenberg as free agents. I'm going to throw it out there, and you could chip in if you disagree, but I don't think any of them are returning. I really don't. Blake Wheeler.
Well, actually, I was going to say, Steve-O, here's my question for you, because we're talking about these macro things, right? Like your approach to a trade deadline if you're a general manager. I love us in our nice seats here at home. We're talking about what Chris Drury should be doing, 4th in the NHL voting this year for GM of the Year. But no, I want to ask you, those were bargain bin moves. Gustafsson, Wheeler, Quick. At the time, Vetrano, Kopp, Nico Mikkola, who just scored a goal in the Stanley Cup final. With those players and that approach, do you think that because you're saying you don't think the Rangers are going to do a big trade, but do you think they're also going to try the bargain bin route again? Because I think that kind of burned them. Pitlick flamed out. Bonino didn't end up staying with the team until the end of the year. So with those like bargain bin, Wenberg, Roslovic type of guys, do you think that's getting the job done? Do you think now that they've tried both, it's really a matter of like whatever can really work? Because they did the Kane, Tarasenko. They've also done the other end of the spectrum of taking a chance on Blake Wheeler. You don't think there's going to be a big trade, but do you think that means they're going to go again on July 1st, picking up $850K contracts?
I think when you compare the two seasons and you go big superstar way and you go the way we just had last season, I think we're going to go back to the way we had last season. We're going to move on from the Blake Wheelers. We're going to move on from the Jack Roslovics, move on from the Wenbergs. I think Gustafson is a free agent as well. He's an interesting one when you take
Yeah.
a look at it. Um, you have Zach Jones. I think Zach Jones is definitely somebody I want to see more of next year. I
Mm-hmm.
thought he had a really good year. Not only did he slot into the lineup really well, but when Fox and Trouba were injured, he looked like a potential mainstay of this lineup. So I think he is somebody. Again, Gustafson is a free agent, but I'd be okay with letting a Gustafson walk in free agency and giving Zach Jones a potential, a full year to develop. That is something I'd be interested in. But I think we go more of that same route. Obviously, we broke it down. We know that one spot on the first line, that's our main area of attack. But I like the thought process there. Now the moves didn't pan out, but I like the process there. And as we get the right two players there, I think we're going to be good, Chives. And again, I'm
Mm-hmm.
admitting Wenberg didn't pan out and Roslovic didn't pan out. And again, our team has our core. We have our three centers set in stone going next year. You got Mika Zibanejad, you got Trocheck, and you have Hedel. You can move Hedel around, but even if you don't move him around, Wenberg, let's say we hypothetically sign Wenberg. That means Wenberg would be a bottom six player, and to me, there's other players that we could bring in. And again, we only have a certain amount of cap space. Wenberg would likely command around 3 to 5 million in that range, in that ballpark. I just think there's more pieces we could fit in for a bottom six type player. What
Yeah.
do you think?
No, and I also think the Hartford Wolfpack, you mentioned Zach Jones. I think those players factor in too. I would much rather see a Will Cooley, a Matt Rempe, and Adam Edstrom come up from the Wolfpack and play as role players, physical, play with an edge, can play the game well as at the professional level. I would rather see the Rangers take chances on those guys than make a trade and now they're paying a guy 1-2 mil. When the cap, it's like they have space, right? Roslovic goes off the books. All those guys kind of go off the books, and they didn't amount to much anyway in terms of how much salary cap there was. The cap's also going up to 88 mil. But with that said, just because the cap's going up, the Rangers are not in a position. They're always right near the ceiling with Igor Shesterkin's contract and Alexei Lafreniere's contract coming up. And I want to pitch back to you. Lafreniere had an unreal year. It's the talk of the town. Do you think he's already earned himself a spot on the power play one for arguably a player like Mika Zibanejad?
It's a good question. Obviously, our core. Like I said before, our core isn't going anywhere. But that begs me, your question right there, it begs me to think that, even going back to the Eastern Conference Finals when we weren't able to scrap up anything, maybe moving Mika down to the second power play unit for maybe one or two opportunities and moving Loft up, maybe that coulda, shoulda, woulda, hypotheticals. You could sit there and ponder them all day, but maybe that could have got something going. Now, I do think when we transition to next year, Chives, I do think we're gonna keep Lop on that second power play, and I really don't think our second power play unit is strong. And I think I point to Lafreniere because he's the type of player that is like the captain of that and really the head man of that second power play unit in my book. Now, again, maybe Mika, some reason, starts off cold next year, and we want to move him down to the second power play and move Lafreniere up. Yeah, that's a possibility. That's definitely a card that Laviolette could use in the book. And again, beginning of the year, you saw this year we literally went through every single hypothetical, all the line combinations. So in the beginning of the year, you see a lot of that playing around with. So yeah, I would definitely be open to that. But in my mind, I think Lafreniere is a staple of that second power play unit because I want my second power play unit to be effective, to create good scoring opportunities. I don't want to have to rely on that first unit every single time because again, We saw it at certain points. They go a little stalish. And to me, the second power play unit doesn't have a lot of dogs on there. You know, we got our guy Heedle on there. Kako remains the question. But Loft to me is that captain. He's the catalyst of that second power play unit. What do you think?
No, I can see that point. I think it is a valuable point, and I think, if to me, if you were going to switch one guy, I thought Lafreniere plays well in the bumper spot on the power play in the slot. I just don't like Vincent Trocheck. You're not moving off of it. Chris Kreider, you're not moving off of it. So I think the candidates are then your two players that struggled the most in the postseason, right? Foxes, and you're not going to put Loff in Fox's spot. So it really comes down to Mika and Panarin. And I just don't think – I think Panarin's passing is still valuable on that power play. I think the question is more geared towards, like, based on Mika's play overall, could we see that happen? And I even though his game on the power play has seemed one-dimensional among other things in his game, I do think that, I just can't see it being a long-term thing. But this far down the line, you ponder it because I do think Lafreniere has played himself into a lot of positions this year to take more responsibility. And before you know it, he's going to be looking for that bag of money.
True. And another thing here, Igor still got one more year left. In your mind, if you're a jury, do you try and get something in? Do you try and get an extension done with Igor this summer, or do you wait it out until he's a free agent?
Yeah, you have to do it this summer because you don't want the season to go on and there to be a disconnect between the management and the player, or even if it's a healthy disconnect, like, all right, we're going to focus on the season. We'll talk about the contract after the season. Carey Price earned 14% of the Montreal Canadiens salary cap when he was re-signed. The reports are that Shesterkin would expect the same, 14% of the salary cap. That's $12.5 million. That's $2.5 more than Bobrovsky is earning right now per year. Now, he's your guy, right? And I thought Lundqvist earned that money, right? Igor has certainly earned that, and I think it's undeniable. He was the Rangers' best player in the playoffs. That outside of Vincent Trocheck, really, and like Lafreniere, but Igor, I would say, was above that. He played like Henrik Lundqvist this postseason. I think you want to find a way to get that done. And then obviously that kicks in 2 years from now, next summer. But, oh boy, that puts the Rangers in. That's down the line, but that's going to be interesting how they handle Shesterkin and Lafreniere's contracts because I think someone's going to have to go. And players are also going to come off the books. Like, I think Trouba has 2 more years. I also think that's something me and you have talked with a lot of Ranger fans. I also think fans have to recognize that, like, Panarin and Trouba come off the books. So when Shesterkin and Lafreniere's next contracts kick in, I believe it's either a year crossover or it's a clean slate after that. So I do think that makes me sleep at night.
I will have to say I'm sleeping a lot better at night now that the 2 weeks have passed since we've been eliminated. And I'm sure everybody out there too can agree. But I agree with you 100%. We have to lock up Igor this offseason because I don't want Igor going a full year with a distraction of he's going to be asked a lot. In his end of the year presser, he was already asked about it. And I feel like that's setting the tone. He's going to be asked about it a lot. And somebody like Igor, he's our guy. Why drag it out? This isn't an Aaron Judge type thing. Lock him up. Pay him the bag. Lock him up. And I don't think we're going to go out there and make that big trade. I do want to get that one big piece, and we'll break that down as this offseason continues of who might that be. But a player like Igor, lock it up. I don't want this being a distraction. And again, we saw, I kind of called it mind games a little bit, but, this year during spurts of this year, we saw Igor be tough, and he was not that good. He had a couple of really bad stretches, and I called them mind games because Quick came in. Quick would play 2-3 games in a row. Igor would sit, come back out, and would give up 5 goals, give up 6 goals. And there was a couple games. And that kind of, I want to raise this because we put it out on our on the gram, a Puck Talk poll and a post. Who is your season MVP, Chaz? And I was a little surprised. A lot of people said Igor was the season MVP. In my book, Igor was the playoffs MVP, aside from Vinny T. But Igor, I didn't really think had a great regular season. When you compared it to his Vezina winning season, I mean, there's a big difference. There was a big difference, and we cannot forget those stretches where he lost 4, 3 games in a row. So I want to get your opinion on that because I was really surprised. I think a lot of people just have the memories of Igor in the playoffs, but I really don't think Igor was the season MVP. I don't think Igor is a top 3 season MVP.
Wow. That's bold, Steve-O. No, I think Vincent Trocheck was the season MVP. I think Artemi Panarin's up there. In some ways, I could see what you're saying because I think that whole top forward line with Panarin, Trocheck, Loff, in some respects, a guy like Jonathan Quick could be up there too. I could see that. But with that, I ask you, though, what matters more, right? Like, Igor didn't have the best 82-game stretch. Not the best 50 starts for him. But, I mean, the playoffs, to me, are like, that's where you make your name. And he's made his name time and time again in the postseason. So, for the limited times he's been on the team where they made it for last 3 years. So, yeah, I think he was not the season MVP, but I do think he was the playoff MVP, and that matters more.
Yeah, it does, for sure. I agree with you 100%. Panarin, I give you, Vinny T was my season MVP. Panarin was number 2. I think, again, want to go back to that point we made a couple episodes ago. If Panarin's not paired with Loff and Trocheck, I don't think he has the year he had this year. I really don't. And again, praise Panarin. He's a great regular season player. It's just the playoffs, that you just, it's a head scratcher. He's just not a playoff player. And I really do think, man, if we were to beat Florida, Panarin would have went off on Edmonton. And I really think, even Mika, Kreider, they would have exploited the matchups against Edmonton. Again, we just ran into the one team that was able to contain us. And again, it's not only us; they're containing Edmonton. I really think Dallas might have been a better fit and might have been a better series for us. Again, the series is not over at that point. But again, all of that remains to be seen. I'll give you the last word here before we wrap. You can, what's on your mind before we go?
Yeah, I don't know what it's going to take, but like we said, fans tuning in love that. If I'm the New York Rangers, I'm building tough. I'm building gritty. I'm trying to change the culture in some way because I think in the next 2 years, it's really going to be decisive on, or really this year, the next upcoming season is going to decide, what's the future? Are they going to have to retool? Is the window propped open for longer? Are they going to find a way to seamlessly get from one group that couldn't get the job done to another? And I give Florida a lot of credit. They were the wild card team that barely made it last year. Then they became really one of the best teams in hockey. And that was through, a lot of players went to Florida when they weren't great. And that's not a hockey town. There's not a lot of incentive. Like, yes, you want to live in Florida. Who doesn't? But there's not a lot of incentive as a hockey player, or wasn't at a time, to go there. A lot of players did. A player like Rodriguez signed with them. Forsling, the Makachuk trade. Like, you look at all those things, I really appreciate that they've kind of built that from the bottom up. And they're starting to get, their best players are now playing at their best. I give them a lot of credit, just the way everything. The hire of Paul Maurice, the trade for Kachuk, all those things. I give them a lot of credit for what they've done, and I think that's the blueprint that every team should follow moving forward.
I agree to that, Chives. With that being said, we got a whole offseason ahead of NY Rangers hockey, and you can stay tuned here. And across all our socials at PucktalkCS for us to break down everything. You will not miss a beat here. So with that being said, you know how we end it. It's just the luck of the puck.